We're live! Oh my goodness, it never gets it never gets less nerve-wracking to press the go live button and then be like, woo, real time. But hi everyone, welcome to the Sense and Sensibility live show, which is the first live show in the All About Austen Readalong, which I'm very, very excited about. I've been wanting to do this for a very long time now, so it's very exciting to be like, getting started. Someone has got the right idea, they're very excited, and they've got a cup of tea brewing. Can confirm we have got teas here, so cheers to that.
Okay. I don't want to smash your mug.
I'm just going to give it a few seconds to see if anyone else wants to join us and chat about the wonderful Sense and Sensibility. So while we're waiting, we will introduce ourselves. Now, I'm assuming some of you might know who I am because it is on my channel, but I'm Kira. I'm hosting the All About Austen Readalong, and to give a little bit of context on what that is, it is a read-along that is, surprise, surprise, all about Austen, which means that we're going to be reading all of Jane Austen's 6 completed novels over the next 6 months. So we started with Sense and Sensibility, we're going in publication order, and that is where we're at. So that's me, I'm Kira, over to you.
I'm Sarah. From Chadwick in the Kitchen, mainly on Instagram and on TikTok. I also have a reading Instagram account, a Northern Reader. It's not particularly in use at the moment, but we're hoping to
boost that,
bring it forward the more we read. But yeah, that's
amazing. Me. So yeah, Sarah's links are all in the description box. If you want to go and check her out on TikTok or Instagram, then her links are down there. Obviously, I'm joined with Sarah literally in the same room, which is quite exciting. It's the first time I've ever done a live show with someone else with me in person, which is a lot of fun. So that's very exciting. And I think we will get into a little bit of Jane Austen talk. We won't talk about Sense and Sensibility just yet, but I think it'll be fun to maybe discuss our Austen experience so far. So if you guys would want to let us know in the comments as well, I think it'd be good to know how many Jane Austen books have you read? Is this your very first one? Have you reread it? Like, how many have you read? That's the question. So for me, I have read 5 of her novels. I've read Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Northanger Abbey and Persuasion, and this was my second time reading Sense and Sensibility.
I've read Sense and Sensibility, obviously, for this
read-along.
Yeah. Pride and Prejudice and Emma, and that's it. Haven't got to the other ones. Hoping though with this I actually do finally get to them.
That'll be fun.
I will. I'll read them all. That's what I'm going to do.
Love it. Oh, this is fun. We're seeing where everyone's from. We've got a hello from Greece. Hi. Hello from Florida. Love that for you. Hello from UAE. Very nice. And hello from France. I had to hold back the urge to say bonjour then, which would have been so embarrassing because I don't speak French. Okay, so that's that. Okay, fun. So Pride and Prejudice twice, Sense and Sensibility twice. Someone else has also read 5 of them. Oh goodness, there's so many people. Love it. Pride and Prejudice, and hello from the Philippines. Hello from Brazil. I feel like I expected a lot of people to have only read Pride and Prejudice because that is obviously the
I think that's
the one. First Jane Austen, very exciting. Okay, read all of them several times. Love it. Oh, and hello from a fellow yogarer. Love that for me.
For you.
Do you know, there's something about me speaking on live where I just can't stop myself from saying love that for you. It doesn't happen as much in real life, but here we are. Not as much.
Don't I encourage it there
sometimes? Don't call me. Maybe it's you.
Because I'll say it back to you in an ironic way now, but then I feel like you say it back to me.
Ooh, fun. Hello from Sweden. Pride and Prejudice about 5 times. Wow. There's my second. Love it. Okay, so now that we've talked about how many we've read and whether it was a reread or not, I think it would be good to talk about if you've read multiple Jane Austen novels like we have, where is Sense and Sensibility currently sitting in your rankings? I'm going to be doing this in all of the live shows to kind of see whether reading them all month after month in publication order will affect my ranking system. So at the moment, of the 5 that I've read, Emma is my favourite, and then Sense and Sensibility is sitting in a second spot. But they are the two most recent ones that I've read. So I read Emma last year, and I read Sense and Sensibility last year, and then I've obviously read Sense and Sensibility again. So it might just be a case of like freshest in my mind are the ones I think I prefer.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm sitting right now. Persuasion is my least favourite of the ones I've read, and I don't really know between Pride and Prejudice and Northanger Abbey, like, because I haven't read them for quite a while. So
yeah, I'm not really sure about those. I haven't read those, but I think I'd actually put, the more I think about it, the more I think I'm likely to put Sense and Sensibility at the top, and then I think Pride and Prejudice, and then I think Emma. However,
get out my house.
Honestly, if we're talking about Emma the film, that's just, obviously we're not, but if we were, that film is just everything.
It's hard, you know, because I think once you watch a movie adaptation, it's hard to then like disentangle it from the book, and like it does become one experience. If you like one, then like you really like the other as well. So
I think it's the first like book to movie adaptation that I actually think properly, wow, this has done it justice.
Yeah,
I think all the other ones, there's always something that annoys me or something that they've missed. But I just think Emma, they did it so well. I think the casting was great.
The aesthetic.
Oh, it was just the way. Oh, honestly,
I cannot wait for the Emma live show. Let's just say that right now. But we won't distract us all from Pride and No,
we're not even on the right book.
Oh gosh. Okay, so. Ooh, interesting. My least favourite is Mansfield Park. My favourite is Emma. Sense and Sensibility is my least favourite. Sense and Sensibility is my least favourite, even though I enjoyed it. Pride and Prejudice is favourite. Persuasion is in the middle. Have to reread Emma, but Pride and Prejudice is best. Then Emma, and then Sense and Sensibility. Love them both, but Pride and Prejudice is number one. And then. Ooh, it'll be fun if you're joining for all of the other ones to kind of see like how you form your ranking as you go. I'm very excited to keep up to date with that. And Sense and Sensibility is fifth. Ooh, interesting. See, Persuasion, like I said, is my least favourite, but the only experience I have of reading Persuasion was at university. I studied it, and I do think the experience of studying a book, though it can be enjoyable, is very different from reading a book for pure enjoyment. And so I think like my experience of that one feels more like work rather than like reading for pleasure. So I'm excited to go back to it again and read it just for fun.
Yeah, I relate to that because I think with Emma, I read it for a school book club, but I wasn't really interested in reading it that much because at that point in my life, I wasn't really into classics. And then I read it and I didn't like it at all. And then I think it was last year or the year before, I went back and listened to the audiobook, and that was a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And just absolutely loved it. Have to agree.
So yeah, it's fun going back and just reading them all for pure fun. Okay, final question before we dive into actually discussing the book would be, if you are the sort of person who rates books, what did you rate Sense and Sensibility? I'll go first. And I rated it 4 stars.
No, I don't rate books.
Oh no, do you not? Well, there we go then. You don't have to say it.
Wait, I feel like let's do it on a scale of what do I enjoy in life?
Food.
Okay. So let's think about it as if it's a restaurant, would I go again?
What's your favourite restaurant? Sorry, that's a really big question.
That's a really hard question.
Just ignore that question.
Okay, let's do it as my most recent one. Gordon Ramsay, Head and Street Kitchen. Absolutely bloody loved it.
And then your least favourite restaurant?
And my least favourite restaurant. What do I not like? I don't even know. Nando's. Don't. Raw chicken. So I'll put it as I'm leaning towards Gordon Ramsay, Head and Street Kitchen. Like I'm about to phone up to book the table. Yeah, to go. Okay, I like that. I really like that rating system. It was fun. Yeah, I would 100% support that. If you don't like rating books on stars, then pick a different rating system that suits you. I'll do it on like a scale of jasmine tea is like my least favourite tea, all the way up to Earl Grey is my favourite, and then underneath Earl Grey, I would put maybe a Melbourne breakfast, and I'd rate this a Melbourne breakfast. Oh, okay. Interesting. So if you've got a special ranking system, let us know what your rating levels are. But for everyone else, appreciating all the star ratings out of 5 for the normal people. I just feel like, I don't know, like star ratings just...
Yeah.
I just feel like I have so many more feelings. Like I can really dislike a plot, but I can love the characters, or I can love the writing style, but I think the plot is kind of meh. And I just feel like the 5 stars never sat with me, so I just stopped doing it.
Yeah, I feel like for like a 5-star, it feels right because you're like, yeah, I love this book. It's amazing. I can't stop talking about it. I very rarely would rate something 1 star, but then I feel like the in-betweens, it's harder because it's like, what makes the difference between a 4 and a 3 and then a 3 and a 2? And rating a book a 3 feels like an insult to the book.
But it's actually not.
But it's not. It's like a good, above average. So like...
It's like, yeah, we're a decent read, liked it.
Yeah.
Would I read again? Probably not, but it was still a good book.
So yeah, I do struggle with ratings. But this one, I gave it a 4 because I loved it. Would definitely read again. Obviously, this was a reread. Still stood up to the test of time. Enjoyed it, but it had room for improvement. So that was where I was like, not going to give it a 5. So
yeah, I would read this again.
I feel like a lot of people are kind of leaning towards that like middle 3 or 4 ground. So we're all seeming to be on the same page, which is great. So let's do it. We've danced around the topic for long enough. We'll start talking about Sense and Sensibility. I love that we got different covers.
Your cover is a lot nicer than mine. I just like these because all my ones match.
If I was to marry a book cover, this would be the book cover.
Why are you going to say mine then?
No.
It's got flowers on it.
I really do like yours. I love the Penguin English Library.
I feel like it's a bit too dark though for Sense and Sensibility. Like I would have imagined maybe a lighter, like the light pink, maybe for that, and then the darker purple to be for the actual flowers.
Yeah. I agree. But this one, it was the bicentennial edition, and it is just splendid. So,
you know what gets me about that though? It's the pages.
Oh, I like the pages.
No.
It's deckled edges. Has anyone here like got strong opinions on deckled edges? Because I don't mind them.
That's what it's called.
But some people hate them. I saw a comment once, or like a review, or someone said that they'd like sent the book back because they thought the pages were damaged and they didn't realise that was what they were supposed to be.
When I went to Waterstones one time, and this was years ago, back before that was like a proper thing, and I was looking and I was like, who's put this out? Like, it looks like it's been through like the shredder or something. And then I saw more books like that. And I was like, oh, it's actually part of the design. Wow.
Oh, someone hates deckled edges because they get bent. Well, let me tell you, I'm not ashamed to say that I am a page folder. So, like, in this book, you might be able to see some of the pages are like, the lighting is really terrible, but I like fold over edges to mark quotes and passages.
You keep them folded. Interesting.
Yeah, so I do like, I've got a system. The system is this. If it's like a quote in the top half of the page and I'm going to want to come back to it, I'll do a little miniature fold at the top of the page. So in the second half of it, I'll do the little fold at the bottom. And then if I'm just marking where I am in the book, then I do a big fold.
Interesting.
So there we go. If anyone else is not against page folding, because I know it is a controversial topic, that's my tactic. So I do think they are harder to flip though. You're right. I feel like they're like, when it comes to like flicking your way to the correct page, it does get a little bit more fumbly because they're a bit thicker on the edge. But anyway.
So you can't do this.
So like you can do this, but like if I was trying to get to a specific folded point, it's hard. Yeah. So that's us on the mechanics of deckled edges. Yay, kindred spirit. Thank you very much. Dog earing your pages too. Oh yeah, I like that too. So let's just do a little brief overview. I mean, I'm sure most of you who are here on this Sense and Sensibility live show have read Sense and Sensibility, but for anyone that hasn't, welcome, enjoy the party. This is a book which is, in my experience, unique of Jane Austen's novels because we have 2 protagonists rather than 1, and this is a book which focuses on 2 sisters, Eleanor and Marianne. They are of a family who is fairly wealthy. They are the Dashwoods, Mr. Dashwood, Mrs. Dashwood, and then there's the 3 sisters, Eleanor, Marianne, and then a younger sister, Margaret, who is largely the most pointless character of the novel. She doesn't really add much, but she's fine.
She kind of reminded me of Eloise from Bridgerton.
Oh, I like Eloise though, but I haven't really read much about her in books, to be fair.
In a kind of just in the way that she's just there just to kind of just occasionally say the random thing.
Yeah, she's like, oh, the quirky younger sister, but it's like they weren't developed enough, so it's like they weren't a bad character, but they were just like, it was a bit pointless for you to be in there. So essentially, we have this family, they're very lovely. Mr. Dashwood, or is he a lord? I'm not quite sure, but Mr. Dashwood dies at the beginning of the novel. Now, as it turns out, Mrs. Dashwood is his second wife, and he actually has a son from his first marriage. His son is set to inherit everything, because obviously this was at a time when women and daughters could not inherit their father's assets, and so the dad, Mr. Dashwood, tries to get his son to take responsibility for his sisters and make sure that they're looked after. But Mr. Dashwood's son has a horrible wife, Fanny, who is like, they're only your half sisters, wouldn't bother to do anything for them, maybe just like offer them a little bit of emotional support. They don't need finances because they're just women, and they can just live on.
She proper goes off in the beginning of the book for like an extended period of time. She like whittles him down.
And it really does show the strength of a woman, though, because although she was a horrible woman, is he called John? Is that the brother's name?
Yeah, John.
John. He was weak. John was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to give them quite a few. What a fitting name for her. I'd love to know where you guys are from in the world, because that word means different things depending on where you are, and they're both not very nice, but one's significantly less nice. But anyway, so Fanny, she has a lot of power over John, and she influences him like massively. So I feel like it does show the power of women. So go Jane, thanks for putting that in there. But yeah, so that kind of sets up this family. These two sisters, they have suddenly fallen from being quite wealthy and privileged to having much less money, and they're at an age where marriage is like a really important prospect. And I would say the key theme of this novel, I said theme really weird there, the key theme of this novel is kind of like marrying for love versus marrying for like societal position, or at least that's one of the key themes. So we see Eleanor and Marianne in their various romantic pursuits, and we also see how different they are from each other. There we go. Any thoughts? Anything to add to the description?
I think you did that so well. When that happened in the book, I had to reread it multiple times because everybody was called roughly the same thing, and it just kind of confused me. It's like, when you're watching a TV show and at the beginning everybody looks the same. That was like that for the book, and it just confused me a little bit, so I just had to reread it.
I get you. So here's an interesting point. Do you think it was really Fanny's fault, or was she just enabling John to his own greed? Like John used her as a scapegoat. So to this, I would say yes and no. So was it her fault? No, because she was a woman, and obviously at this time she actually had no power to change or alter what John wanted to do with his money. Just like the sisters, were going to lose the money no matter what because they were women. So Fanny, she just shot her shot, like she was like, I'm going to try and influence it so that I keep all the money for myself and for my son. But actually she didn't do it because she didn't have the power to do that. So did John use her as a scapegoat? I wouldn't say so. I think he was just weak. Like, I think if she'd not said it, he would have given the sisters the money.
Yeah.
But equally, he didn't take any responsibility. He had no backbone.
Yeah, he seemed very, like he wasn't really bothered either way, because the way she was kind of convincing him or saying, she wasn't even really argumentative or anything like that about it. She just kind of said, don't you think it should be better for this? And then when it was, Mrs. Dashwood was going to take the breakfast china or something like that, and she was like, oh, I know we have all of these things, but don't you think that would be nice in our home? He was like, oh, yeah, sure.
And I feel like, she was just she manipulated him 100%. She was smart, he was stupid, and he allowed himself to be manipulated. But at the end of the day, the fault lies with him because he's the one who has the power and the money. So
I don't think he seemed to care that much. Like, not in a bad way. He just didn't seem that. He was just quite a bit indifferent about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like, so other people are saying they were also confused. I think of Jane Austen's novels, this one probably requires the most amount of attention, especially at the beginning, because like I said, it's the only one that has multiple protagonists, so it is a bit harder to follow.
And a lot like happens in the first.
Yeah, you get a lot set up right at the beginning.
Yeah, like it's this person's already dead, like this is happening.
Yeah, it's like it starts with something quite intense.
Yeah.
So, which I like as well, because I think, classics like these have like a bit of a tendency or a reputation for being a bit slow off the mark, whereas this one certainly could not be accused of that. It was just like right in there, which obviously you have to catch up with her pace, but I prefer that to, it being really dull and slow.
I think it was definitely faster than Pride and Prejudice. Like Pride and Prejudice, do love, but I feel like it takes a bit more time to actually get into it, whereas this one, you're just like you're in it.
Yeah, you really are. So next thing I wanted to mention is obviously the title of the novel, because that kind of is important in terms of how we look at Eleanor and Marianne, the two protagonists. So it's Sense and Sensibility. Now, to me, like, going into it, maybe I'm stupid, but I'm like, what can be the difference between sense and sensibility? Because I'm like, surely being senseful is being sensible and having sensibility. I just thought these words kind of mean the same thing, but they obviously don't. In this instance, having sense is kind of the leading with reason and rationale and being very like calculating and cautious with your decisions and not really leading with emotion. Whereas sensibility is kind of the more like free and romantic, leading with emotions and letting the heart do the ruling, which is obviously very important for how the two sisters are very different in their attitudes to romance. So Eleanor represents sense. She's the older sister. She's very, sensible, which is where it gets confusing, because she's sensible but she's not sensibility. And she has to kind of take the responsibility for the entire family, because her mum and her younger sister as well, and Marianne, they're all very like woo floopy. So that's them, and then Marianne is obviously the like whimsical romantic one. So who do you think you are more like?
Oh, Eleanor, definitely. There's nothing whimsical or whoopy about me. Like, I think I'm definitely more cautious, more pragmatic. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
I feel like that's more me. Would I like to be like Marianne? Maybe not, to be honest. I definitely feel like more Eleanor. I'm quite happy being Eleanor, I think. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm more of a Marianne.
Yeah, you definitely are. But you're like the more positive aspects of her, not the part that annoyed me, but like the part where she's just more freeing and more just all around happier, willing to do more things kind of person. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of you.
I also felt like her emotions. I mean, this week I've cried 4 times at Downton Abbey. I think I can't withhold emotions. If I'm like, for example, as we get into the novel, there is a romantic interest for Eleanor, Edward, who Marianne is not so keen on him as a romantic interest, and she wears that on her face just like she can't hide it. I'm so like that. Like if I'm even just
definitely,
if I'm even the least bit unimpressed with someone, everyone will know about it.
You'll know, 100%.
So thanks, but yeah. So I feel like I'm definitely more of Marianne. So this is fun. You've got your own version of Sense and Sensibility right here. Love that. So I'd love to know who you guys are. You're already some of us telling us. Listen, I'm an Eleanor and I cry at Downton Abbey all the time. This is part of the human condition. Well, let me tell you, I'm watching it with Jay. He hasn't cried even once. All I'll say is I'm midway through season 3 and it just got tough.
Oh my god. No,
So I cried on episode 1 for crying out loud. So like I cannot withhold my emotion, but Jay,
mate,
like a rock.
You wait. You think it's bad now?
I can't even. Eleanor is out of the top drawer and lives. What does that mean?
I don't know what the top drawer means, but I agree with the giving Lizzie Bennet a run for her money.
Yeah. Someone thinks they're more of a Marianne, but less of a drama queen, at least now, maybe not in my late teens. Agreed. I was probably definitely more dramatic when I was younger.
I think I still am quite dramatic, to be honest. I have a tendency to act like the world is crumbling.
I feel like more Eleanor. My sister's more like Marianne. Really nice. I have to keep her in check all the times. Eleanor. Yeah, so I feel like probably we all do have a bit of both in us, you know, like most people have elements of all of them, but
yeah, no, I definitely
feel like
Eleanor, definitely.
You know, you like lean more towards, it's like a spectrum, the Eleanor and Marianne spectrum. So
I feel like if this is the middle and Marianne's here and Eleanor's here, I feel like you're more closer to the middle, whereas I feel like I'm just over here. Just in general.
I get you. Eleanor and just being more reserved. Yeah. So yeah, basically wait till you know someone and then you're a Marianne and trick them. But yeah, I do think it's interesting, but totally feel like the term sense and sensibility, maybe they meant different things back then, but it was like, I don't think it conveys as much of a contrast as there actually is between the two sisters.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I feel like I thought it was quite interesting because Pride and Prejudice, I would associate both Lizzie and Mr. Darcy as having.
They're both Eleanors.
They both got the Pride and Prejudice aspect of it.
Yeah, you're right.
Whereas here, I feel like it was more distinguished. One is one, and the other is.
I wonder
another.
How Jane went about naming her novels, because you've obviously got Mansfield Park, Northanger Abbey as being named after the place that they are. You've got Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice as having been like named after traits of the main characters. You've got Emma, classically named after the main character Emma, and then you've also got Persuasion, which is just like a little bit different altogether. So yeah, I agree. I definitely think the word has like changed meaning a little bit. Once you start reading it, it becomes very, very clear. But when I went in, I was like, I wonder which one's meant to be which, because they both sound like they should mean the same thing.
I thought it was supposed to be like an ironic title. Like I thought they were the same words, and I thought it was just. I literally thought
being called like words. Truth and honesty. Or
yeah, like
I
thought it was like that. So I was shocked when it's the words actually mean different things. Yeah,
so that's fun. I thought it'd be fun to like establish who we all are on the Eleanor and Marianne hierarchy. Okay, so I feel like that's the most we can really talk about this novel without going into spoilers. So like I said, I'm assuming most of you guys have read the novel. If you haven't and you want to avoid spoilers, then maybe come back a bit later on. If obviously you have, then let's carry on. So this book, like we said, it starts quite quickly, and we dive into romantic partners very quickly as well. So immediately upon, starting the novel, Fanny and John moving into Norland, the family home, Fanny's brother, Edward Ferrars, turns up.
Not Edward.
He turns up, and Eleanor and Edward start a little bit of a little thing together. Although being quite reserved, they're both kind of like, you could tell they fancy each other a bit, but then it's also hard to read their intentions. And by the time it comes to Eleanor and her mum and sisters moving out into a smaller home and moving counties, they haven't really established anything firm within the relationship. And so I feel like it's really interesting right from that beginning point to see the difference between the two sisters, because it's like Marianne is so frustrated with just how Eleanor is dealing with Edward. She's frustrated with Edward as a potential romantic prospect, because she's like, he is not emotional enough, he doesn't understand poetry and art, and he just sees them as poems or as paintings, but he doesn't understand the great emotional depth behind them. And I just think it's so interesting, like it's very distinct right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's almost a bit too noticeable.
Yeah, I think it's probably, you could argue, a little bit clumsy. in the way that this novel is written and like the characters are put together. But equally, you know, this is Jane Austen, can't be too critical, and it's also her first published novel. So I'm like, I think you can definitely tell that there's a bit less like nuance and artistry in the way that she creates these characters as opposed to
I think if
later
she were
ones.
to go back and rewrite it,
she is dead now.
Alas, unfortunately.
Rip.
I think, or if she wrote this one last, or maybe even in the middle, I think there are just like a few tiny little things that I'd say maybe do differently.
Yeah.
But I think all in all, like the book is great.
It's a really enjoyable read. I think despite like, I think the main issues I have are like structural.
Yeah.
So I think, there's like a very clear emphasis right at the beginning of like, let's make it very obvious that these two sisters are super different in their personality, and they obviously love each other, but they're never going to see eye to eye on certain things because they're very, very different.
I feel like the way she did that in Pride and Prejudice, again, to bring it back to Pride and Prejudice, honestly, but the way she did the sister relationships in that, I feel like if she had written this one after that, maybe it would have been more subtle, but still there. I just feel like at the beginning it was just very, very clear cut. Yeah,
it certainly was. In French, the title means reason and sentiments. That makes a bit more sense. And sensibility. So anyway, what was I going to say? It was the other kind of structural thing throughout the novel that I think is a bit clumsy is, so we start the novel, we set up the, you know, the family circumstance, and then romantic interest number one, Edward, is dropped in as a romantic interest for Eleanor. Then they move out, Eleanor's romantic interest is no longer in the picture, and then as soon as we get to their new home, Colonel Brandon is mentioned. We'll talk more about him later, but just to quickly kind of overdo it, Colonel Brandon is mentioned, and he is an interest of Marianne, and then she's not really into him, and then Willoughby gets dropped in, and he is another interest of Marianne. Then Willoughby is taken away from the situation, and then Edward Ferrars comes back into the situation, and then Edward leaves, and then we go back towards Marianne. And I feel like for a novel that was on two protagonists, she obviously was struggling to deal with writing multiple like romances at one time. So like the way that she dealt with that was literally just by physically removing one romantic protagonist from the picture. I noticed that the first time I read it, I was like, okay, so she literally has to physically, geographically move the characters around for it to work in her mind to be able to have the multiple different.
I didn't actually realise that. That actually makes sense.
So like that feels a bit too convenient. Again, it's not like a major issue, but it is something that I noticed.
Yeah, you won't really have alternate chapters in Jane Austen's.
No, which probably would have been, you know, again, if it was like written now as a modern day version.
Oh, that would have been great.
They would totally do that. So,
but that actually, because there is a lot of movement. Like a lot of people come, a lot of people go. You're right there.
Okay.
A lot of people come and a lot of people go.
It's got a lot of characters. I mean, that is typical of Jane Austen novels. She does have a lot of characters, but I just felt like the movement of these characters felt a bit clumsy. Oh, this guy.
Oh no! Honestly, I love Edward.
I didn't mind him, but I felt like, you know, I personally felt like, though this was a novel of two sisters, it felt to me as if it was Marianne's world and Eleanor was living in it.
Yeah, I definitely, because Eleanor was my favourite out of the two. As I said, Marianne I thought was a little bit whiny, too much. But I think it definitely was Marianne needs to be the focus of this novel, and it's more about her love life. And I feel like maybe because Eleanor and Edward were introduced as liking each other but not really having it progress anywhere so early on, that kind of meant that like you can kind of work out what's going to happen when a certain love interest is introduced. Yes,
I feel like it was, you know, perhaps that was intentional because of Marianne's like tendency to make herself the main character, and
Yeah.
like she was very forthcoming with her emotions, and you know, she was very like out there.
Yeah.
And then Eleanor was more reserved. So yeah, Jay has just come to feed the cat because he's been a noisy boy. If he comes back out after he's had his dinner, then he can come on the camera. But it gets towards 8 o'clock or 7:30 as it was, and he gets really, really grouchy for dinner. So apologies for that. But yeah, I think possibly it was intentional. Marianne has main character energy, like she thinks that the world revolves around her, whereas Eleanor is a lot more conscious of what other people need and what's going on for everyone else, and she doesn't put herself out there so much. So I think maybe that's the case as well. But I did see a comment which was it's disappeared up the line now, where someone said, "Do we not also wish that they spoke more about Margaret?" Which we did touch on briefly. And I was going to say again, you can see the level up when we get to Pride and Prejudice, because in that novel, clearly we've got a main character. Obviously, Lizzie is the main character, but there are 5 sisters.
Yeah.
And she writes each of them, you know, with very distinct characters, and, you know, they each have their own storylines. They're not all necessarily, you know, taking the main centre stage. But I feel like she does, each character that she introduces in terms of the family has like a role to play and a character, whereas I feel like with Margaret, it was a whole lot of like, why has she actually been written?
Yeah, I think they all bounce off each other quite well, but I feel like Margaret is hardly ever in it. How many appearances does she have? Like,
you know, a couple,
2, 3, like if that. But I feel like Eleanor and Marianne, you can kind of see like the start of her writing with having these characters bounce off each other, but it is still quite, it's a bit jolting, is that the right word? Jarring, thank you. When they kind of, you can see something's kind of coming to fruition, but it's not really. And I think that's why they're so distinct, because she can't get them to kind of work together in a way, which I think is different from Pride and Prejudice, because you have all of them bouncing off each other, working so well together. And I think that's where the difference comes in.
Yeah, I feel like, here's a good point. Kept forgetting who Margaret was because her mentions were so far apart. It's true. It was like, yeah, I think maybe if there was a more stringent editing process, they'd, like if she went through, you know, Penguin Random House now, they'd be like, yeah, cut Margaret. She doesn't add anything to the novel. You know, it's pointless. Like, it's just, yeah.
I think Margaret could have worked maybe if she was more of a matchmaker. Like if she
was like a youthful Mrs. Jennings.
Yeah, like if she was in it, I feel like she could have really added some mischief, like some humour. You know, in Pride and Prejudice, Mrs. Bennet is hilarious.
Yeah.
I feel like
I think Mrs. Jennings is really funny in this one. And you could have had like a really funny like duo there, because like Margaret in the film version, which I will talk about, she's like a very forthcoming child. She wants to get like involved in everything, and like I feel like if that was the way the character was in the novel, she would have kept like trying to get interested and like you know, bounce off of Mrs. Jennings and cause that mischief, and I think it could have been a good like comedy duo,
and like said things to embarrass Eleanor and Marianne in front of
their romantic interest. I agree, it definitely could have happened, but I'm not like mad about it. It's just like if you was to pick apart bits of the novel that just weren't quite as good as they could have been, that would have been it. So okay, that's next up. So we've got some structural issues. Did you have like a favourite thing about this novel?
I don't think there was one favourite thing. Oh no, I did enjoy Eleanor's monologue towards the end, where she basically talks to Marianne about all of it. I did really enjoy that, but I figured with this book it was more everything as a whole. Like it was the culmination of everything together that I think really actually made it for me. There wasn't one specific part of it that I really loved. Like I can name scenes from Emma and Pride and Prejudice, but this one I just feel like it all kind of went together, if that makes sense. Like I felt like you needed everything that followed it.
Yeah, I agree. It is definitely like, yeah, I feel like in terms of plot, it's difficult to pick out like super significant events, at least in the like first half of it. I did quite enjoy when they went to London, because I feel like a lot happens there.
Yeah.
So you obviously have the revelation of Marianne's relationship breakdown, misunderstanding, and her like emotional turmoil. I do think it's so funny, like looking back at how women were portrayed in novels back then, in terms of like hysteria and emotional ailments, and like I'm like, were people really like this, or like, you know, surely not.
They can't.
You're the historian.
They actually can't have been. The thing is, though, a woman was labelled hysterical for reading a book. Like, she could. The trouble is that a woman could have her opinion and then, or say something, without a man speaking to her, and she would have been labelled as like deviant and hysterical. And I just feel like it's a really difficult thing to actually pinpoint. And I feel like maybe because Jane Austen was a woman, like she didn't write under a pseudonym, did she?
Oh, I don't think so, but I might be wrong.
Because I know that the Bronte sisters wrote under.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
But so maybe she had to write her female character. This is pure speculation. It's not a historical, actual fact. But maybe she had to write women in a certain way. She could, because all her protagonists, the ones that I've read, are quite independent. But in the end, they do all get married, and maybe she couldn't have a female protagonist be so independent, because why would a publisher allow that to happen to a woman, really?
Yeah, that is very true. But I just think it's really funny. I'm like, I mean, it's interesting to look back. Obviously, we read these books and it is entertaining for us, but it's not entertaining in the same way that it would have been for people back then who had literally nothing but books and real life. You know, like
the Train Wrestler.
It is interesting to see. So that I enjoyed that part of the London experience, and then also I feel like that is where I really warmed up to Eleanor's character, because she takes control of the situation with Marianne, but also I feel like she becomes more emotionally vulnerable as you start to see the impact of like how much she actually does care about Edward and her feelings about potentially losing him, but also her wanting to protect the feelings of others in the process. And I just feel like she stops then feeling like such a bore and like, oh, she's just like stiff and emotionless, and you're actually like, oh, she's has emotions obviously, but is also much more aware of other people's emotions than Marianne is, because Marianne could only really see the world through her experience and emotions, whereas I feel like Eleanor chose to put other people's feelings before her own, and that doesn't mean she doesn't have them. But I feel like that point in London is where, you know, where that becomes clear. Like you start to get the complexity of her character a lot more.
Yeah, I think at that point everything does start to, like, everything's kind of building, but then at that point it's like, right, okay, things are going to actually start kicking off now. Like we've got some groundwork, now we're gonna go full steam ahead.
I feel like I'm darting all over the place with this novel, but we're going backwards now to discuss Marianne and her romantic pursuits. So,
oh my god,
honestly,
I went through a field day with this whole
it was a roller coaster. It was a roller coaster. So, like I mentioned earlier, they move house. They're offered a little cottage by Mrs. Dashwood's cousin, who's got an estate. They move to this cottage. It's very lovely. And then they're going out to dinner at this big house where her cousin lives. And they obviously meet the people that are in his little society. One of those people is Colonel Brandon. And Colonel Brandon is a nice guy, but I feel like he is the blueprint for, well, I mean, most of the male love interests of Jane Austen's novels, but specifically, I feel like he's got a lot of the Mr. Darcys about him. You know, he is cautious and withholding of emotions, but he's obviously got a certain level of interest in a character. He's less like pushy than Mr. Darcy, and like, you know, a bit less like argumentative. Obviously, Lizzie and Mr. Darcy have their like little situation going on. But I feel like in the sense of, you know, clearly being interested in something, but then like withholding that from people and having like a very, you know, like stiff and proper personality that makes it hard for anyone to read them. You can see that that was obviously what Jane Austen was like interested in writing, of like this like stone cold proper man who then kind of like melts for the right lady at some point later on. And I can see that that was like, you know, what she was going for and what she evolved throughout her novels. So like people call it a Mr. Darcy type, but really it's the Colonel Brandon type.
Yeah, he's the
prototype.
The one, the first one.
So we have Colonel Brandon. He's all right. He likes Marianne. She's not interested in him, probably because he's like 90 years old and she's 17.
This is the thing, because he is like in his, I can't remember how old he exactly is, but he's in his 30s. But for me, I picture this 50, 60 year old man. And for that, I was like, I can't, because it was different in Emma.
Yeah.
With like Mr. Knightley.
Even though that is creepier.
This is the thing, that one didn't faze me.
It doesn't faze me either, but when you really think about it, when he's like, oh yes, I've known you since you were a baby. Let's get married. Let's get married. That's where it gets a bit creepy. But obviously they don't really do it like that in the movie, and you know, you can overlook it. But in this one, there just seems like a distinct difference both in personality type and age between Colonel Brandon and Marianne, to the point where you can see right from the start that is who the romantic interest is supposed to be, and it's all about the warming of their like frostiness between them, etc., etc. But I couldn't buy it. Yeah, it's the way that they portray his character. He seems so like stiff and like so devoid of emotion that like I find it really hard to warm up to him, and that like sense of his like properness makes him seem older than he probably actually is. So, and
I feel like Austen tries to push on this idea of like opposites attract, but I just feel like it doesn't work, because I just feel like they're not even opposites in the same kind of setting, if that makes sense. Yeah,
like their circles shouldn't really cross. Like I just struggle, aside from him being like physically attracted to her, and probably he maybe was attracted to her like youthfulness and her energy and her emotion, because she had all of the things that he didn't have. Whereas I feel like he didn't really have many things that she'd be like, I wish I was more stiff and cold and lacking of emotion.
Yeah, it's a bit nice.
Like, so clearly just not compatible. And if he'd have ended up with Eleanor, I could have. Where did that comment go?
That would not have pleased me.
Where did that comment go? Oh yeah, there it is. It's right there. I clicked on it. It wouldn't have pleased you because you love Edward, but it would have made more sense.
Yeah, I do get, if Edward hadn't have been, if I hadn't have had that stuff at the beginning with Eleanor and Edward, like kind of where you can see where it was going,
because you know,
and then I think, you know, I would have been like, Colonel Brandon and Eleanor maybe more, but I feel like because
they established more of a connection. Eleanor was a lot kinder to him than Marianne was, and also they were both of the slightly less outwardly emotional personality type, so like they would have been more compatible. But anyway, so that's Colonel Brandon. He's kind of just like lingering in the background for the entirety of the situation.
Yeah, I feel like he doesn't really ever really come out much.
No, Oscar says he does not come out much. So that's that. But then we have the charming, the dashing, the exciting Willoughby, who literally rescues Marianne from the terrible fate of a sprained ankle, which again, I'm like, calm down, get yourself home. I once did a walk from Robin Hood's Bay to Whitby and back again with an injured knee, and you didn't see anyone carrying me. That's all I'm saying. I know.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, you should be. But so sprained ankle, she is rescued.
It's just the typical thing, though, isn't it?
Damsel in distress.
Yeah,
in distress.
Like, in distress. Yeah, like it's a bit too. It's like, oh, please rescue me.
it's a
Be
very
the hero.
convenient circumstance.
Yeah.
So he rescues her. He's obviously like, oh, this is a bit of fun. I'll stick around for a while. Meanwhile, Marianne, literally, seeing as she fell over, was head over heels in love with him. Thank you. Right from the start. And so she is absolutely besotted. She thinks that they're going to get married, and he is obviously very, very careless with Marianne's emotions. And he leads her on, takes her to his house that he's going to be inheriting, allows her to pick out furniture. I mean, like, if that's not indicating...
That's how to lead somebody on. Like, 101, how to lead somebody on.
Yeah.
And he was just too squeaky clean. Like, I feel like I knew something was dodgy.
Yeah, it just seemed too perfect, but they weren't admitting it to their family. And I'm like, you know what? Something's going to be awry here. A real womanizer indeed.
Yeah.
Right piece of work. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah.
Side point, but slightly relevant. He has to leave to go on business somewhere, and she gives him a lock of her hair, which I find upsetting.
Just imagine. Just going somewhere in that here. Take it.
The thing is, right, is that I like hair on my head.
What would you do with it? Like wrapped in ribbon and like just keep it in your desk drawer?
Actually, like when
Use it as a bookmark.
used to be like a very small child, and my mum would obviously, like, you know, you'd be in the shower and mum would comb my hair, so like with the conditioner and stuff in it. I'd like gag when the hair came out because it made me so upset. Wet hair.
I hate it when you just see it.
Stop.
No.
So anyway, so do they smell it? Where do you even keep it?
What do you do with it?
How does it work? Made me so uncomfortable. And then when they break up at some point, they're like, please return the lock of my hair. I'm like, what do you want it back for? What are you going to do?
Let me just put it back in my hair. It's in my head.
Yeah, so I'm glad that that's a tradition that has not made its way into modern society. Because, like,
I'm not cutting my hair off for nobody.
No, and like, I would, if someone asked me for a lock of hair, you'd be like, what are you on about, you
I'd
creep?
be like, excuse me, can I just phone 999?
Give it back, I need to glue it back to my hair. Yeah, exactly.
Where would you even take it from, though? Because if you had, I suppose they wouldn't really wear the hair down. Because I was going to say, if you wore your hair like this, like, even if I cut it from like there, you'd be able to see.
Like, would you be considered a wrong woman if you had your hair down? Is that improper?
Yeah, it's a sign of poverty.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so anyway, that was just a side note, but I had to discuss it because I think it just showed the ridiculousness of their romantic, you know. That was a real indication that he's interested in her, because why would you want someone's hair if you weren't going to marry them?
Literally, if the tour of the house and the furniture wasn't enough,
then taking her hair surely was.
Yeah.
So Willoughby, off he goes, disappears. Marianne is very upset, but only cheered by the fact that she thinks they'll be back together. I'm sorry, I've got to go back to the hair because this comment's too good. See how many exes you had based on how short your hair was.
My hair's quite long. So.
Yeah, oh God, maybe I had a box full of them.
God. To be honest, I wouldn't put it past him.
I know, Willoughby was
He'd probably be like, let me just file this one away. Let me just put this one away.
Yeah.
Doesn't he give it back to her?
I think he does upon
with
request.
All the letters and stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll say you take your hair
she
back.
thinks it's her hair.
My God, imagine if it wasn't. Imagine being like, oh, I've lost their hair. Let me get another girl's. God.
Honestly, who knows what they were doing back then? They didn't have much to amuse them, so maybe this was the height of entertainment. Imagine if the male protagonist wasn't as extension.
Oh my God, you could do a little pin.
Just as two
like the top of your little.
Maybe that's where toupees originally came from. Just collecting random women's hairs and attaching them together to cover baldness.
You know, they used to like sell their hair for money, like really poor women.
Jo
so
does that
like
to women, doesn't she?
Yeah, and Fantine and them is.
Oh, well, there we go then. So, back to the story. So we're there, and then an opportunity arises. Mrs. Jennings is going to take the two Miss Dashwoods to London town. So off they go to London. Marianne's buzzing because she's like, I'm going to go see my love of my life, Willoughby, and we'll be together again. But then they get to London. Does it all go to plan, Sarah?
No, it does not.
No, it does not.
Because Willoughby is a snake.
Is it a real snake?
Isn't it?
Nasty piece of work.
I've done enough of my life to swear.
And that's where the real drama kicks off, because Marianne nearly dies of a broken heart.
This was where I actually felt sorry for her. Like, because obviously I don't like her, I think she's annoying, but no woman deserves to have the heart broken like that. No woman deserves to be led on like that. And I just feel like, such a dick.
Yeah, and I also think, right now, it'd be established, you would feel the physical effects if you thought you were going to marry someone and then they pulled out of the relationship without really giving you a reason. He goes about it in a really uncaring way, where he basically
quite nasty,
just like ditches her for someone else and kind of like almost acts as though she imagined it. He gaslights her.
Oh yeah,
massively.
Like he really proper manipulates her to the point where it's like, wow.
If that was now, people would be very empathetic. I mean, people were empathetic, they were.
Yeah.
But like even more so, people would be like, yeah, of course you're feeling the effects of this physically because you've been through emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
Whereas at the time, I feel like it was less understood. And like, here's what really got me was when their brother comes to visit them in London. So John Dashwood comes to see Eleanor and Marianne, and he's like, oh, Marianne, she's lost her bloom and she's going to be an old spinster, and now he's basically saying there's nothing worse than a young girl who's lost her beauty. I'm like, I don't think you're anything special, John.
This is the thing, I don't think John is like means to be like that. I just think he says things so flippantly. He just doesn't have any like,
he doesn't really think
awareness.
But I just thought like that was obviously indicative of like how young women were perceived, and she was seen as like, she was being seen as like just worthy based on her looks, and she was only a teenager at this point. So it's like, to imagine to be like written off because you were upset by something terrible that happened. It's just like, and from your own brother as well. I mean, like if he's gonna say it, like what are other people saying behind her back?
Yeah.
So I thought that was really horrible and really good for Jane Austen to include that as like an indication of like how women were viewed in society at this time, and how despite her wanting to marry for love and everything, other people were viewing marriage as obviously like a really important social like movement, like as in like who you married was really important to like your future economic prospects and all of that kind of stuff. And they were basically writing her off as like, well, she's not going to get anyone good now because she's ruined herself, basically.
Yeah, like, so, she's had a heart broken, and now she's, and
obviously her emotional turmoil suggested to people that maybe more had happened between her and Willoughby than was just like a normal courtship, which obviously we don't really have any reason to believe that, but because she was so open with her emotion, it kind of made her seem more like she'd like fallen. So it was
I think a lot of people as well would have known his kind of reputation. Like obviously it's not made clear to us like at the time, but I think people would have actually known it and then associated like, oh, she's a fallen woman because he's a rape or whatever.
It's like, I feel like in this situation, her purity was called into question because Willoughby was around having no chaperone, and we didn't believe women then. And then even if nothing had happened, people were like, oh, well, she's a young girl who's happy to go around with men without a chaperone. And it was just awful how the men were really given no responsibility for these things, and it was all placed on the woman, who in this instance was a young girl, a minor, who was being misled by an older man. So he was obviously young as well and probably misguided, and I'm sure not malicious but just selfish and unaware of other people's emotions and the effect of his behavior on other people's emotions. But it's horrible that she's the one to suffer from that situation. and he kind of just gets away. His reputation slightly damaged, but like he could go on and live his life
definitely,
as
he's
he
a man.
wants,
He could like survive.
So that's, I feel like that there's probably so much more to say. So do you have any more specific points? Oh, do we want to talk about our thoughts on the ending?
Oh yeah, the ending. I thought it was too rushed. Like way too rushed. I feel like even if she did need to rush the ending, I feel like, because the ending was like what, this big.
Yeah.
I feel like it could have at least been like, just add maybe 20 more pages on, and that still would have been rushed, but it would have been less.
I agree. I think compared to the rest of the novel, like the amount of time that was given to the conclusion was really not balanced with the amount of detail we had about everything else. So just to quickly run over the conclusion, as we've discussed already, this was a novel written at a time where a woman was writing, and in order to get this book published, the female characters, the female protagonists, had to be married off by the end in respectable relationships. And so all good things come to an end. Eleanor and Edward are married, and then Marianne, lovely young Marianne, is married off to the old Colonel Brandon. And that is the bit where I struggle, because there was no indication that Marianne was particularly invested in Colonel Brandon, even as a friend, might I add, but especially as nothing more. Whereas Eleanor and Edward, there was a build-up of their relationship and their emotions throughout, a real slow burn, but it was built up throughout. Whereas Marianne and Colonel Brandon, it was like, they're married. And it felt as if there was no explanation given to why they got married, how it happened, what went on, how they felt after they were married. You know, it just felt very like abrupt.
Because we went from, what was it, Willoughby coming back and being to Marianne, like, oh no, I want you, like you're the one for me, and all that kind of stuff. And then Eleanor has that monologue where she's like, you're being selfish, you're being this, you're being that, like you're not really understanding everything. And then
Oscar,
it just kind of goes like from that, when he's just like, no, then it's just Brandon. Sorry, I got distracted by the cat. I don't even know what I was saying.
What did you think of the ending?
Today, that's unimpressed. So I too was unimpressed.
He said it was too rushed.
Definitely.
But yes, so I totally agree. I just think that for me was like the main thing where I knew it had to be a 4 stars instead of a 5, because the whole thing, it just felt like not enough explanation was given, and we knew that Jane Austen had the capacity to give that kind of detail, because she gave us it for the rest of the novel. So
like everything was so well done. They had such an, like, Eleanor and Marianne had such an in-depth conversation about Willoughby and about him coming back, and about how Marianne shouldn't go with him because he's not trustworthy. Like, he is a nasty, manipulative person, the way he's treated her. And then it goes from all of that to just then she's married, or getting married to Colonel Brandon. It's a bit like, well, I'm sorry, I forgot he even existed. I forgot he was a character in this book. I thought it was a misprint at first. I honestly did. I was like,
oh
what?
Gosh, a misprint indeed. Can I just say thank you for all of the compliments on Oscar's behalf. He is very handsome.
Thank you,
but he did just want to be on camera. We all noticed how he suddenly shut up now that he's had his moment in the sun.
He wants his glory.
Okay, so Jay, hi Jay from downstairs, has asked us thoughts on the film. Now I know Sarah hasn't watched the film.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, we did discuss this just a few minutes ago. But yeah, so I watched the film, the 1995 film, the one that had in Hugh Grant,
lovely man,
Kate Winslet.
I do have thoughts though on who has been cast, because I haven't actually seen it, but you told me earlier who's actually in it, and I don't know how I feel about it now.
Emma Thompson and obviously Alan Rickman. So
I have issues with those two, but I love them.
I love all of those actors. Do I feel they were accurately cast?
No.
I think Kate Winslet as Marianne, I can see that to an extent. Emma Thompson as Eleanor, I think age-wise, like, I just didn't really get the vibe that, like, Kate Winslet and Emma Thompson would be sisters. Like, I just felt like there was maybe too much of an age gap between them. And then Alan Rickman as Colonel Brandon, yeah, could be, because he does have that, like, very proper way of talking and, like, the like, very,
I feel like
stiff
I see
personality
that
type of thing, but, like, a bit of charm to him. And then Hugh Grant, who I think is lovely. But I don't think he was an Edward Ferrars, because I think Edward Ferrars is a bit more awkward, a little bit less emotional, a little bit less pretty. And Hugh Grant is very pretty.
Hugh Grant's just too...
He's very charismatic. He also can play funny very well, and I just feel like he wasn't quite the right casting for Edward Ferrars. So...
You know who I think would have been good? I don't know his name, but you know Sherlock, the TV show?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
No, the TV show one. Is it?
Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Is that him?
Yeah.
Yeah, him. I think he would have been good. I just got that vibe.
Interesting. So I'm interested in watching the miniseries. I didn't have time to watch it before this live show, but as I've mentioned, I'm currently watching Downton Abbey, and I am very much a fan of Matthew Crawley.
Oh, Diet Matthew.
I love him. I also think he's amazing. For anyone that's watched the Eurovision film, and he's the flamboyant Russian, he's amazing. He's so amazing. And so him as Edward Ferrars, I can get that, having seen him as Matthew Crawley, different time period, but still like a similar setting and area of society, and so I feel like I'd like him a lot more. Now, I won't lie to you, I did not love the film, and I was disappointed, because although I was questioning the casting choices, I did like all of the actors, and so I thought this could be really, really good. Now, the very first few scenes I felt like captured the wit and humour of Jane Austen's novels, which I think this is one of her, like, funny novels. Like, there are a lot of, like, silly interactions between characters, and the characters can often be seen as very, like, caricatured and over the top. Like we've discussed, the two sisters are very like polar opposites, and I think that lends itself to a lot of, like, wit and humour, and I felt like that came across in the first few scenes. But as the film adaptation went on, I felt as though it lost all of that and just focused on the serious elements, and just kind of lost the, like, charm of Jane Austen's novels. I am a type of person who, though I'm a reader and I like to read books, I will often prefer movie adaptations to books.
Interesting.
Because I just love seeing stuff brought to life, and I'm also a lover of, scores and, the music that they bring. Yeah. And I think that can absolutely transform a literary experience. And for example, like with War and Peace, I absolutely love to now, like, read it, or like, my experience of the novel was better from the music. Like, I feel like that like adds a mood to it, so then I will, like, go back and reread a novel with the image and the music of the movie in mind, and it, like, transforms my experience. So I will very happily say that in a lot of cases I preferred the movie adaptation, though I still love the novel, and I like the way they come together. Whereas in this one, I don't really see them as having come together, and I still distinctly prefer the book, whereas I thought I might prefer the movie adaptation. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I don't really see how they cast kind of work together. Now that I know who's in it and everything, it just gives me Love Actually vibes, and that could be because
almost, I mean, except for Kate Winslet, there is a whole lot of Love Actually.
It's about the different characters and stuff.
Yeah. So, I think that's everything I need to say about Sensibility. So I'm just quickly going on Discord on my phone to see whether there were any questions, because I did ask for some. And if you have any questions as well, right here, right now, especially based on what we've already talked about, then do feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, so someone asked about feelings about Eleanor and Edward's relationship from the beginning. I feel like we've kind of talked about this, but, like, roughly and, like, super quickly. I didn't feel like they had a massive amount of chemistry, but I could see the like slow burn of their relationship throughout. And like I said, it was at the point where I think Eleanor was faced with the prospect of losing him that she really realised how much she cared, and allowed her emotions to come out. And at that point, I started to be invested in the relationship. But from the beginning, I wasn't that bothered about them.
I think the one thing, whilst I do love them too as a couple, I think the one thing I didn't think he needed to be engaged. There was already so many other engagements happening, because obviously Eleanor needed that reason to be like, no, actually, like, I want you. I feel like it could have been something else. He could have been sent away on business.
Yeah.
You know, like somewhere far away.
Well, I feel like that was where she needed to have the prospect of him marrying someone else.
Yeah, I just feel like there were so many engagements in that book.
Showed us a lot about her personality, because she was willing to keep the secret for Lucy, despite it being really difficult for her emotionally. She also didn't want to confess her feelings because she wanted to put Lucy before her own, because she recognised that Lucy would benefit from it, like in a societal situation. And she knew that she, even though she'd lost a lot financially in terms of her family circumstances, was still better off than Lucy. So she was willing to put that before her own emotions. And I also feel like her sadness, but that she buried, like, I just feel like it showed us a lot about Eleanor as a character that we wouldn't have gotten unless it was a romantic turmoil rather than just like a distance situation.
I think maybe if we were going to have that engagement, then one needed to be dropped. There were too many. I thought that was also quite interesting, because the other books, you don't have like Pride and Prejudice and stuff. People get engaged and then they get married. That's it. You don't often have all these, no, we're going to call off the engagement. I don't think that's something you really like see for the time period. And I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, they were very flippant in this one. Okay, so this is kind of relevant since we've talked about Lucy Steele, but what about the Steeles? So Lucy Steele, again, I didn't really like her as a character as such. Like, I thought she was a bit like annoying. However, I recognised her role in like, again, giving us that insight into Eleanor and her feelings and her situation. The older Steele sister, like another sister that didn't need to be in it, like kind of like Margaret, I felt like, well, I don't know her name. They just called her Miss Steele. And I'm like, was she at all relevant to the novel? No, she was not. So the Steeles, Lucy, I can see why she was in it. The other one, I'm like, why was she there?
Yeah, I just didn't really. I mean, partly because I felt she was a block in my Eleanor and Edward love story. But I just thought it didn't really. There was too much of everything else going on.
Yeah.
And I just thought, can we just not have this happening as well? I thought there were just a bit too many conflicts.
Yeah, I agree.
For the shortness of the book as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this is an easy question, but if you have a different idea, then definitely let us know your answer in the comments. But someone asked, who do you think the true antagonist is? We'll say it on 3, 2, 1. Are you ready?
Wait, do you mean like the main character?
No, antagonist is like the protagonist is like who the book is about. The antagonist is who causes the problems. So like,
okay.
You know, you know who? Do you know, like, do you have an example in your mind?
Who's the antagonist in Pride and Prejudice?
I don't know. I'll use a really obvious example. In Harry Potter, the antagonist is Lord Voldemort.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's the baddie.
Okay.
Okay, so
are we doing it after 3 or
3, 2, 1, say it.
Okay.
Okay. So who the true antagonist is? 3, 2, 1. Willoughby. Okay, yeah. So to me, I think it's obvious. That's why I wanted to do that to see. Which is funny if we did something different.
Imagine if I was like,
it's 100% Willoughby. Yeah, Willoughby. We're all team. Yeah. Willoughby sucks. So
he was just such an ass. How not to behave towards women.
Yeah. How not to get the girl of your dreams.
Yeah. How to not behave, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Ooh. What do you think the girls' marriage prospects would have been if the ending didn't work out in the way that it did? There didn't seem a sense of urgency early in the novel for them to find a match. Now, I do agree with that. Like, Mrs. Dashwood, for someone who's lost all of her worldly goods and her status and has 3 daughters to look after, did not seem that pushy about getting them married off, whereas like Mrs. Bennet, she's very like...
Mrs. Bennet thrived on that. She was like, my children need to be married, we need to get through this.
So yeah, there was not a lot of urgency, but equally I find it difficult to know how it would have ended. Wow, this person's clever. Ashley, the true antagonist is the expectation of women finding husbands and the cost of living with little to no money. I mean,
this is what I aspire.
You are an educated and critical reader.
My dissertation for me, ultimately.
I don't know if you've got an English degree, but if you said you did, I'd believe it. Whereas I've got an English degree, and I'm just like, it's Willoughby. So 2 types of readers, but I agree that is 100% like from a thematic point of view rather than a literal antagonist. That is definitely a theme of all of Jane Austen's novels. Whether she has a rich or a poor protagonist, she really focuses on the role of marriage in society and how it is a social tool, not romance. Even though her novels are romances, she kind of explores how romance is the least important thing when finding a romantic partner at this time. So definitely agree with that. In terms of their marriage prospects, Jane Austen, she writes in a fairly obvious way, and that's in no insult to her writing, because I think it's lovely, but she writes in a fairly obvious way in the sense that there is usually, per protagonist, a potential love interest that you know from the start is probably going to be the one. Then there is an issue, a block, an obstacle put in place, a scapegoat, a red flag, whatever you call it, and then that person turns out to be not very nice, and then the original guy comes back around, saves the day, they're all married. So I find it hard to think about logically what would have happened to them if things hadn't worked out, because in Jane Austen's world it was always going to work out like that. Yeah,
I feel like if it was going to work out differently, I think Edward and Eleanor probably still get married. But I just really wanted Marianne to just think, you know what, Willoughby wasn't for me. I need time to get over it. I need time to process my own emotions. I'm not going to get married right now. And then maybe if Jane Austen ended it with like, oh, in 5 years she got married, that would have satisfied me more, to be honest, than getting married to Colonel Brandon, because that just kind of annoyed me a little bit.
I agree. For anyone interested, Ashley doesn't have an English degree, but I'm confident based on just that one comment that if you did have an English degree, you'd have done really good. Like, I really feel confident, because that's the kind of thing that in 3 years of university I'd never think to say. Lol. So yeah, no, I agree. You clearly, I mean, it is fun to analyze books, and I do envy people like who take that less literal view of questions, because I'm like, oh my god, yeah, that's so true, but I don't always think to phrase it in that way. But anyway, okay, few more questions. I'm going to try and fire through, because we've been on here for quite some time now. Okay, someone asked, first of all, they liked how place was very strong in this novel. Do you have a favourite location from the book?
I don't think so, to be honest.
I like the cottage as a location. I think it was nice that they actually moved from like a big house to a little cottage, but we're still happy there. And then based on what happened in this location, I enjoyed London, but less so for the location and more so for what went on there. Okay, so do you think that Lucy was wrong in her actions?
I don't know.
I don't, because obviously they were engaged, and also I don't think she was intentionally upsetting Eleanor. I think she was another character of many in this novel who was just a bit emotionally unaware of other people's feelings.
Yeah, I don't think she was manipulative.
Like, I think she was just totally not
I think part of me did wonder when I was reading it, like, surely she can't be that... Gullible's the wrong word, but do you know what I mean? But I think genuinely she actually...
she was just not very worldly. She wasn't very conscious.
She just didn't really have a clue.
She was very naive. Okay. Do you think, this might be a good one to end with, that there is a union between sense and sensibility during the end of the novel, or that one prevails over the other?
I think that's difficult to say just because the ending was so rushed. I think maybe if we saw more of how, because I feel like the way it looks at the moment, from my perspective, is that Eleanor got what she wanted. Marianne kind of seems to get the short end of the stick, but like she does say that they get married and they're in love and everything. But I think it kind of looking at it from that angle and what we know, I would say that sense prevailed a lot more. But I think Marianne could have easily had a stronger ending with regards to sensibility. Even if there was like an old family friend who they'd always been like really buddy with, like Marianne was really friendly with, and then it kind of progressed more. I feel like maybe then you'd say they were more on an even level, but I just feel like the way it ended just for Marianne.
I feel like they were a bit of a McDonald's M. So like they both started. I can never get in the frame of these shots. So they both started here. This is sense. This is sensibility, and they both kind of went wee, and they kind of crossed over and overlapped. So like they were still, you know, connected to their side, but they explored the other side. So like I think
Marianne more than Eleanor did.
Yeah, so I think with Eleanor, she will always be governed by, like, if we're gonna, you know, like kind of like star signs, you know, where like people say that you're like governed by like certain star signs or suns and moons and all that kind of stuff. Like I feel like in this instance, they're each always going to be governed by their bias, which is towards either sense or sensibility. I think we see them mature throughout the experience, and so Eleanor recognizes that withholding emotions entirely gets her absolutely nowhere, because that essentially meant that she almost lost the person that she loved. And so by allowing herself to become slightly more emotionally vulnerable, she ended up getting the guy that she wanted. So go Eleanor. And then Marianne recognized that not all romances have to be picture perfect love stories where a man sweeps you off your feet, rescues you like the damsel in distress, and fixes all of your problems. And actually, having experienced that and the way that it all went wrong, she knows that sometimes all is not as it seems, and that the initial wave of emotion you feel doesn't necessarily mean things will work out well. Meanwhile, she might not have felt that initial spark for Colonel Brandon, but she recognizes that in the long term, that may be a situation and circumstance that might bring her joy and happiness. So I think she did have to settle, and I think allowing yourself to open up to a little bit more emotion is maybe a little bit easier than if you are a naturally like passionate and emotional person, kind of dialing that back. So I think definitely the point is that maybe we each have sense of sensibility within us, and that being entirely one or the other is not a good way to be, but by opening yourself up to both, you kind of get the best of everything.
Mic drop.
So on that note, I feel like that was a very nice question to conclude on, because it brought it right back around to what this is all about, which is sense and sensibility. So I have really enjoyed this discussion.
I've had a blast.
It's been a lot of fun. We were both nervous at the beginning, like, what are we going to talk about? But here we are, nearly an hour and a half later.
I was worried we weren't going to have anything to say.
I know.
I thought I was going to forget the book.
Literally, it's always the same for the live show. You get on and you're like, what did I even read? And then you start talking.
Literally, I was like, what's my characters' names?
So I really hope you guys have enjoyed as well, and thank you so much for joining me for the first All About Austen Readalong live show. There is also going to be a reading vlog for Sense and Sensibility, which will be going up next week, where you can see like my in-depth thoughts as we go. I also share a lot of quotes, which I really enjoyed throughout the reading experience. So that is a lot of fun if you're interested in that. And for anyone that isn't aware, obviously reading in publication order, and the next book to read, which is our September read, is Pride and Prejudice, which has been by far the book that's come up most often in this discussion, aside from the book that we're actually meant to be reading. So this one is going to be a whole lot of fun. I can't wait to discuss it. And just a reminder that there is a Discord for All About Austen, which I definitely have forgotten to put in the description of this video, but I will add it in. So if you're not already on there, then definitely go and join us, and you can talk about your thoughts on this book and all of the other ones as we go. But with that said, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.